Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes.
So Kamala's out there again explaining things nobody asked about, laughing at things nobody said, and somehow still blaming white guys for the weather. You've got to admire the consistency. Every time she opens her mouth, it's like a word salad tossed by a malfunctioning blender. Somewhere, a speechwriter is hiding under a desk, whispering, "Please stop talking." The crowd bursts into laughter, and Greg smirks, pacing like a predator who's already found his prey. "Yeah, the Democratic Party's in panic mode again," he says, eyes narrowing in mock concern. Poll numbers are tanking, donors are sweating, and Kamala's approval rating is flatter than a day-old soda left out at a climate summit. He flips through his cards with theatrical impatience. But don't worry, they've got a plan. They always have a plan. It's called pretending everything's fine while the ship is halfway underwater. He looks straight into the camera, that mischievous glint flashing. They're the only party that can turn a 7-Eleven Slurpee giveaway into a lecture on privilege. I'm serious. You can't even grab a free cherry slushie without being told you're complicit in systemic brain freeze. The audience howls. Greg lets it breathe, nodding like a man who's both amused and exhausted by the madness. A mock headline flashes across the screen. Kamala Harris to lead new initiative. Project Pretend, we're winning. Greg points at it. See? At least they're honest now. Step 1, form a task force. Step 2, hold a summit about the task force. Step 3, blame Elon Musk for something. Step 4, send out another mass email about democracy being under attack. He tilts his head, smirking. By the way, they send that email every 12 minutes. I checked. He strolls to the side of the desk. Look, I get it. They thought politics would be fun again. Turns out, it's hard to have fun when you've turned joy into a hate crime. The audience laughs, but Greg doesn't. His voice drops an octave, more deliberate now. This used to be the party of artists, rebels, the cool kids. The ones who said, question authority. Now they times are times the authority. And they're lecturing us about pronouns and recycling while cities crumble and crime spikes. He pauses, tapping the desk. You can't fight the system when you times are times the system. He starts pacing again, energy building. The left's sense of humor is officially dead on arrival. You mention a joke, and they act like you just kicked their therapy dog. Late-night TV used to roast power. Now it just babysits it. Every punchline comes with a fact check. Every host sounds like they're applying for tenure. The crowd roars. Greg's grin widens. It's like watching a comedy funeral hosted by NPR. He spins the topic back to Kamala, the spark that ignited the segment. She laughs at the wrong time, preaches the wrong message, and somehow still manages to sound like the guidance counselor you never liked. It's not leadership, it's performance art. And not the good kind, the weird kind, with interpretive dancing and tax-funded grants. Greg leans in, voice softening but dripping with irony. The problem isn't Kamala. She's just the face of a bigger sickness, a party that's forgotten how to connect, how to laugh, how to listen. Everything's about messaging, optics, narratives. But when the narrative's broken, the optics don't matter. He pauses again, letting the silence hit. You can polish the talking points all you want, but it's still nonsense in a pantsuit. The crowd erupts one last time. Greg raises an eyebrow, that smirk turning razor sharp. They say they're building a big tent, he says slowly, milking every word. But from here? He shrugs, glancing toward the audience. It looks more like a homeless camp of bad ideas. The laughter rolls over him, the camera zooms in, and he just smiles, a man who knows the punchline has already landed. Greg leans back in his chair, that sly grin crawling across his face like he already knows the crowd's about to lose it. You ever notice Kamala's laugh? He starts, shaking his head. It's not really a laugh, it's more like a software glitch. You can practically hear the Windows error tone behind it. Every time she laughs, an intern's career dies somewhere in Washington. The audience cracks up, and Greg waits, milking the moment before his tone shifts. But that laugh, it's kind of the perfect metaphor for the modern left. It's forced, it's awkward, and it's completely disconnected from real life. He sits forward now, elbows on the desk. When did the left forget how to have fun? he asks, dead serious for a beat. Remember when they used to be the wild ones? The rock stars of rebellion? They used to make jokes that shocked the establishment. Now they times the establishment, and they treat laughter like it's hate speech. The camera zooms in on that half smile again. Terry Gilliam, the guy from Monty Python, said Trump brought comedy back. When Monty Python thanks Trump, you know we've officially slipped into the upside down. The audience erupts, but Greg keeps going, voice rising with playful frustration. Comedy used to be fearless. You could talk about anything. Religion, race, politics. It was dangerous, exciting, alive. Now, it's like going to church, except everyone's pretending to be guilty about something they didn't do. He looks over to his co-hosts, mock whispering, "Do you ever watch late-night TV anymore? Kimmel, Colbert, Fallon, it's not comedy. It's confession night for white liberals." He mimics the trembling, performative sincerity of a modern host. "Guys, I just want to take a moment to apologize for my skin tone." The audience roars. He shrugs. "These people used to roast presidents. Now they're writing fan fiction about them. You can't make jokes when you're still crying over election night." Greg tilts his head, pretending to scroll through an invisible phone. Then there's woke Twitter, America's emotional support group for people who've never been told no. Every joke gets labeled problematic. I post something funny, and instantly, "That's offensive." "Yeah. So is your dating life, sweetheart." The crowd howls. He nods toward the camera. "You think I'm kidding? Try being a comedian in 2025. You need a lawyer, a trigger warning, and a priest before you even hit send." He gestures at the big screen behind him, where a split-screen montage plays. On one side, classic comedy. Carlin, Pryor, Chappelle, early SNL, all fearless, raw, brilliant. On the other side, a black screen with crickets chirping. "Comedy before woke," Greg says, pointing left. "Comedy after woke," pointing right. The audience cheers, half in laughter, half in mourning. He raises his eyebrows. "They say we've evolved. No, we've just sterilized humor. We turned comedians into HR representatives. Everyone's afraid to offend the mob, and guess what? That mob doesn't even laugh, they just tweet." His tone hardens slightly. "They call it progress, but it's not progress if you have to whisper your punchlines. It's not freedom if every joke comes with an apology." The crowd claps, but Greg waves it off, leaning closer again. "You know what's really funny? The people who shout the loudest about tolerance are the least tolerant people you'll ever meet. They'll tolerate anything except disagreement. They want comedy that preaches, not provokes. They want applause, not laughter. And you can feel it, it's killing the art form." He lets the silence hang for a second, then lowers his voice. "We used to laugh together. We could disagree, argue, and still share a drink afterward. But the woke generation doesn't want that. They want purity. They want punishment. And in the process, they've made comedy something that used to unite us, the latest casualty in their crusade for control." A beat passes. He smirks again, breaking the tension. The irony is beautiful, really. The people who claim to fight fascism turned comedy into a speech code. They're policing words like TSA agents who hate joy. Greg straightens up, eyes locked on the lens, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "They used to fight for free speech," he says slowly, the room going quiet. "Now they fight. Free speech." The audience bursts into applause, some cheering, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Greg just smiles, that same mischievous spark flickering behind his eyes. "Welcome," he says softly, "to the funeral of fun." Greg leans forward, that familiar smirk, tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You ever try listening to Kamala Harris without subtitles?" he asks, eyes darting toward the camera. "It's like decoding a message from a malfunctioning GPS." She starts out confident, "America must move forward, with purpose." Then suddenly we're lost in a swamp of syllables that mean absolutely nothing. Every time she talks, an English teacher cries. The audience erupts, but Greg isn't done. "Seriously, I've heard refrigerator magnets with better sentence structure. Her speeches are like those bad AI chatbots. You think she's about to say something profound, and then boom, we must work together, because working together is how we work. Thanks, Kamala. Revolutionary. He picks up a note card and squints at it. And that laugh, good Lord. That's not a laugh. That's a cry for help. It's like the sound you make when you realize the GPS is recalculating again. You could tell her the economy's on fire, and she'd just start giggling like someone tickled her teleprompter. The audience laughs harder. Greg shrugs. I get it, though. It's a coping mechanism. If I had to defend those policies, I'd be laughing too, mostly to keep from screaming. He flips the card dramatically. Now the Democratic Party says they're expanding the tent. Expanding? Yeah, but it's full of boxes, identity boxes. Check one, or get canceled. You can't even show up unless you've got at least 3 diversity points and a grievance score above 80. He leans back, eyebrows raised. That's not inclusion. That's a pyramid scheme for victimhood. Greg's tone shifts slightly, more mock serious now. This is what I call the Kamala effect. It's not just about her speeches. It's about what she represents, a party so obsessed with checking boxes that they forgot to check reality. They demonize common sense. They worship victimhood. They label anyone with an independent thought as a threat to democracy. He pauses for effect. Newsflash. Disagreeing with you doesn't make me Hitler. It just makes me awake after 9 p.m. He gestures toward the audience, voice dripping with irony. They're losing white men, Hispanics, and taxpayers, pretty much everyone who pays attention or pays bills. And their response? Double down. Keep pissing into the wind and call it a climate initiative. The laughter rolls, but Greg's delivery sharpens. It's wild. The more they lose, the louder they preach. It's like a cult that keeps shrinking but still insists it's growing. They can't see the irony. They're the ones who built the wall. Not the border one, the ideological one. A wall made of hashtags, shame, and $400 college words that mean nothing. He looks at the camera, deadpan. You ever notice Kamala never actually answers a question? You ask her about inflation. She gives you a TED talk on feelings. We must take this moment to reflect on the importance of taking moments. Great. Meanwhile, gas is $6, and your grocery bill looks like a ransom note. He leans forward, hands clasped. They call it messaging. I call it verbal yoga. Lots of stretching, 0 core strength. He flips another card, pretending to read. They keep saying, we're the adults in the room. Yeah, adults who think math is racist and gender is a mood. He looks over to his panel, mock concern in his tone. Kamala says she's expanding opportunity. For who? Speechwriters with head trauma? The audience loses it. Greg holds up a hand, pretending to defend her. No, don't get me wrong, Kamala is a trailblazer. She's the first vice president to make people miss Dan Quayle. The crowd howls. Greg drops the sarcasm just enough to let the truth seep in. But here's the thing. It's not just her. She's the mirror. Every time she gives one of those word salads, she's showing you the whole machine, an entire political class that runs on empty rhetoric. They don't want equality anymore. They want control. They don't want fairness. They want obedience. They don't lift people up, they just tell you who to hate next. He glances down at his notes, sighs, and looks back up. They've turned politics into therapy, and not the good kind. The kind where the therapist cries more than you do. The laughter fades into murmurs of agreement. Greg's voice softens, but his eyes are sharp. The Kamala effect isn't about incompetence, it's about illusion. It's about pretending to lead while managing decline. It's about smiling through disaster and calling it progress. They keep talking about building back better, but everything they touch looks like it's been through an earthquake. He lets the silence linger, then delivers the punchline like a dagger wrapped in velvet. Kamala doesn't represent empowerment, he says slowly, each word landing with precision. She represents HR training in human form. The crowd explodes. Greg just smirks, takes a sip of coffee, and nods. Welcome to the Kamala effect, he says, voice dripping with mock sincerity, where the only thing consistent is the confusion. Greg sits back, the smirk fading into something sharper, colder. The laughter from the last segment still lingers, but his tone shifts lower, steadier, the rhythm of a man about to drop something uncomfortable. "You know what's funny?" he begins, voice calm as a surgeon's hand. "The left keeps saying they fight for fairness, but what they really mean is nobody gets dessert until everyone's miserable." The crowd laughs, but it's uneasy laughter, the kind that hits too close to home. He nods slightly, letting the truth sting. They call it empathy, but it's envy with better PR. They say they want equality, but what they really want is equality of outcome, and the only way to get that is to make sure no one's allowed to win. He leans forward, resting his elbows on the desk, eyes locked on the camera. Kamala calls it equity, right? Equity. Sounds nice, sounds noble. But here's what it actually means. You don't climb the ladder, they just pull it down. Instead of giving people a boost, they break the rungs so no one gets ahead. It's not about opportunity, it's about control. The audience murmurs, a ripple of dark amusement. Greg's grin returns, thin and cutting. It's like if your broke cousin keeps telling you capitalism is evil while Venmo requesting gas money from you every Friday. That's not a philosophy. That's a lifestyle. He picks up his mug, takes a slow sip, and continues. They frame it as compassion, but it's punishment. You succeed, you're the enemy. You save money, you're privileged. You want to build something for your family, and suddenly, you're part of the system. Their idea of justice isn't lifting people up, it's dragging achievers down, one Prius at a time. The audience breaks into laughter, and Greg tilts his head. You ever notice they always drive Priuses? Nothing says moral superiority like a car that sounds like a dying blender. He lets the laughter ride before sliding back into that controlled rhythm. They've built a religion out of resentment. They don't admire success, they resent it. They don't praise discipline, they mock it. They look at anyone who made something of themselves and say, that's unfair. But fairness doesn't mean sameness. Fairness means freedom. And freedom means some people will do better because they worked harder, took risks, or just got lucky. That's life. It's not oppression. It's reality. Greg flips through his notes and pretends to read. You know, when they talk about the system being rigged, I always wonder against who. Because from where I'm sitting, the only people getting ahead in this system are the ones complaining about it. They scream about capitalism while cashing book deals and Netflix specials. They tweet about injustice from an iPhone made by child labor. The hypocrisy isn't a bug, it's the business model. He looks back at the audience, half amused, half disgusted. They don't hate billionaires, they just hate billionaires, who aren't them. The laughter turns into applause. Greg lowers his voice, as if confiding something. And that's the heart of it. It's not about justice, it's about jealousy. It's about power disguised as pity. They use words like inclusion and equity to sound compassionate. But all they're really doing is feeding resentment. They don't want a world where everyone can rise. They want a world where no one stands out. A world so level, it's flat. That's not progress. That's envy in a power suit. He stands for a moment, pacing, the energy shifting from comedy to confrontation. It's like this, he says. You're at a dinner table. You worked for your meal. You earned it. The person next to you didn't. And instead of asking how you did it, they demand that your plate be taken away because it's unfair they're still hungry. And the government nods and says, you're right. So they take your plate, divide it in half, and hand it back cold. The crowd groans, laughing through their disbelief. That's equity. Cold leftovers and a lecture. Greg pauses again, the smirk back in place, but the eyes dead serious. They talk about compassion, but what they really love is control. Because if they can convince you that success is immoral, they can justify taking it from you. They call it redistribution. I call it revenge. The audience falls quiet, waiting. Greg steps closer to the camera, lowering his voice to a near whisper. The left doesn't want change, he says. They want payback. The silence hangs for a beat before he cracks the final grin, the one that cuts like a punchline and a prophecy at once. And that, he says, pausing just long enough for the rhythm to hit. Is why envy always ends the same way. Everyone broke, everyone bitter, and everyone waiting for someone else to pick up the check. The laughter returns, sharp and knowing, and Greg just raises his cup, a toast to the absurdity. Here's to fairness, he says dryly. May we never be equal in misery. Greg leans back, flipping through his cue cards like a man reading tomorrow's headlines before they're written. The grin is back, but this time it's quieter, sharper, the kind that cuts through the noise. If CNN covered me the way they cover Kamala, he says, eyes glinting under the studio lights, I'd be the Pope by now. They treat every one of her word salads like it's the Sermon on the Mount. You can practically hear the anchors whispering, so brave, so powerful, so completely incoherent. The audience bursts into laughter, and Greg holds up a hand as if to stop them. No, seriously. If she tripped over her own teleprompter, they'd call it a graceful moment of resilience. He takes a sip from his mug and shakes his head. The media's turned Kamala into a pop star. They write puff pieces like she's Beyoncé with a press pass. Meanwhile, every time she gives a speech, somewhere in the control room, a producer's screaming, "Cut to commercial, cut to commercial." The laughter hits again, but there's a chill under the humor now. Greg's voice drops. And that's the problem. Journalism used to question power. Now it babysits it. They're not watchdogs anymore, they're emotional support animals for the establishment. He glances at the camera. You notice how every Republican is either dangerous, extreme, or my personal favorite, literally Hitler. They call every Republican Hitler but can't spell accountability. The crowd roars, and Greg just nods like a teacher grading a failing paper. Fact checkers. Don't even get me started. Fact checkers are like bad exes they only call when you're winning. They'll spend a week debunking a meme, but when Kamala forgets what state she's in, suddenly, it's radio silence. The laughter turns into knowing applause. Greg paces, gesturing animatedly. And these so-called journalists act like they're guardians of truth. Please. The only thing they're guarding is their Twitter verification badge. They don't interview, they intervene. They don't report, they recite. Every news cycle feels like a therapy session for people who can't process that the world doesn't match their hashtags. He picks up a different card and waves it. Take Harvard, for example. Homeland Security subpoenas their admissions data, and Harvard says it'll take time because they need to do the math. Which is weird, Greg says, voice dropping to a mocking whisper. Because they stopped letting in Asians. The studio explodes with laughter. He lets it breathe, nodding toward the audience. That's inclusion math, folks. Divide by race, multiply by guilt, and carry the hypocrisy. Greg's grin fades, but the gleam in his eyes doesn't. That's the mirage, fake empathy, wrapped in fake journalism. They don't care about truth, they care about tone. As long as it sounds compassionate, it doesn't matter if it's completely fabricated. Kamala could say gravity is sexist, and the Washington Post would run a 2,000-word think piece on the patriarchy of physics. He pauses, pacing slowly, every word deliberate. You ever notice the tone of every modern headline? It's like your therapist wrote it. Americans are anxious about democracy. Experts warn of misinformation fatigue. Translation? You're too dumb to think for yourself, so they'll think for you. It's not reporting anymore, it's emotional curation. They feed you outrage like comfort food. They sell fear like it's faith. Greg steps closer to the desk, lowering his voice until it's almost intimate. And that's what keeps the whole circus spinning. Politicians perform, journalists applaud, and the public gets the bill. The truth isn't dead, it's just under new management. He looks directly into the camera, that smirk returning one last time. Colder now. Precise. They don't report news anymore, he says, pausing just long enough for the silence to settle in. They curate feelings. The audience claps, some laughing, some shaking their heads, but Greg just sits back, eyes fixed on the lens, like he's daring the next headline to prove him wrong. Greg stands, the chair sliding back like it knows the moment just changed. The smirk sharpens, the room hums. All right, he says, voice steady, electric. Roast time is over. This is a rebellion. The crowd leans in, They tried to cancel laughter, but laughter doesn't ask for permission. The first cheer hits, quick and hot. He nods. They thought bullying comedians would tame the culture. They thought purging punchlines would purify the country. But comedy doesn't kneel. Comedy fights back. And experience well. He paces, hands painting the air. Look around. The real counterculture isn't a gallery opening in Brooklyn. It's a comedy club in Ohio. It's a podcast in a garage. It's your group chat that refuses to speak in hashtags. They want a world with padded walls and pre-approved jokes. We want the unpredictable, the messy, the human. He stops, grinning. Welcome to the joy war. He points to one side of the room. On the left, moralizing and performative guilt. He points to the other. On the right, humor, authenticity, rebellion. Pick your fighter. A laugh ripples. Greg shrugs. We're not the cool kids. We're the ones laughing at the cool kids. We don't need VIP wristbands. We've got punchlines. He tilts his head, that half-dare in his eyes. The cool kids write essays about joy. We just do it from the stage. He rolls his shoulders, the tempo building. Cancel culture tried to turn comedy into a parole program. Fines for offense. Probation for sarcasm. Apologies for breathing the wrong way. They issued style guides for humor, like they were the fun police. Meanwhile, the audience kept sneaking out after curfew to see the comics they banned. He laughs, quiet and dangerous. You can't cancel a laugh that lives in the back of someone's throat waiting. That sound doesn't answer to you. He points at the camera. Terry Gilliam said it out loud. Trump brought comedy back. The man broke the fourth wall of politics. Every press conference felt like a heckler walked into the State of the Union. You didn't have to like him. You just had to admit the obvious. Trump accidentally did what every woke writer failed to do. He made America laugh again. The crowd roars. Greg raises a palm. Not because he told jokes, but because he made the people who hate jokes reveal themselves. He leans into the mic, conspiratorial. That's the tell. The people who despise laughter fear what it does. Laughter punctures lies. It rearranges power without passing a bill. You don't vote on truth in a comedy club. You hear it. You feel it. You can't unhear it. That's why the scolds want comedy to ask permission. Because when you stop asking permission, you stop needing them. He starts walking again, gathering speed. This is bigger than politics. It's cultural oxygen. If you choke it off, everything suffocates: art, friendship, romance, dinner tables, Thanksgiving. They say humor is violence. No, humor is ventilation. You want a peaceful country? Let people tell jokes again. He grins, mocking himself. We're not out here with berets and black turtlenecks. We're not reading manifestos to a tambourine. We're idiots with microphones and coffee breath. But here's the twist. While they chase clout, we chase truth. While they curate outrage, we curate timing. While they write 2,000 words about a pronoun, we drop one punchline that clears the room. He gestures to the wings, as if inviting the ghosts of Carlin and Pryor to step out. Comedy used to terrify the powerful because it was a mirror they couldn't smash. We're bringing that mirror back. Not a funhouse mirror that flatters, a clean one. The kind that makes cowards blink. He nods toward the audience, almost tender. You can feel it, right? The shift. Comedy rooms filling up. People tired of being scolded. Couples on first dates daring to laugh out loud again. That's not apathy. That's courage. That's the sound of a country remembering it has a spine. He stops. Lets the silence press in. They told you joy was privilege. They told you laughter was dangerous. They told you offense is violence. Translation? Sit down. Shut up. Feel guilty. Buy their book. He tilts his head, voice razor smooth. No, thanks. We're too busy living. He spreads his arms, like a director calling for the final shot. The joy war is simple. They hoard shame. We share jokes. They manufacture consent. We manufacture crack-ups. They sermonize. We improvise. And guess who wins in a free country? He lets the crowd answer with noise, then slices through it. They want us solemn because solemn people are obedient. Laughing people are unpredictable. Laughing people remember what freedom sounds like. His eyes flash. You can censor a tweet, you can flag a video, you can shadow ban a clip, but you can't put a content warning on a punchline already detonated in a room. He takes one long breath, and the cadence turns cinematic. This is the part in the movie where the rebels stop hiding and start dancing on the checkpoint, where the graffiti shows up on the palace wall, where the joke lands so hard the censors pretend they didn't hear it. He smiles, small and dangerous. Because when laughter becomes illegal, rebellion wears a smile. He leans into the mic for the close, voice soft and certain. They can shame. We can shrug. They can threaten. We can grin. They can cancel. We can sell out the next show. The punchline isn't just a joke anymore. It's a flag. He taps the desk once, like a gavel. Long live the comedy rebellion. May your timing be tight, your skin be thick, and your enemies be humorless. Greg sits forward, the lights dimming just enough for the room to feel tighter, closer. The laughter has faded into a low hum of anticipation. He looks into the camera, the smirk replaced by something quieter, almost reflective. You know, he says, voice steady. Kamala Harris isn't the problem. She's the symptom. A walking metaphor for a movement that confuses noise with leadership. The audience laughs softly, but Greg doesn't. He leans in. You can't mistake applause for progress, and that's exactly what they've done. They think a standing ovation equals success. But it's not applause they're hearing, it's people clapping just to end the speech. He taps the desk once, the sound echoing faintly. Everything we've talked about tonight, it's all connected. The envy, the humorlessness, the hypocrisy. It's not random. It's what happens when a movement trades authenticity for theater. They preach fairness but can't stomach competition. They talk inclusion but blacklist disagreement. They claim compassion, but what they really want is control. He lets the silence breathe, then cracks the faintest grin. They call it equity. What it really is envy in a pantsuit. Nobody gets dessert until everyone's miserable. That's their motto. The audience chuckles, but Greg's tone stays calm, cutting. They've killed laughter, buried comedy, replaced joy with judgment. They've turned free speech into a crime scene, and empathy into a brand. And the worst part? They did it smiling. He stands, walking around the desk slowly, his voice carrying the weight of finality. They built an empire on outrage, a culture on victimhood, a media machine on feelings. And then they wonder why no one trusts them anymore. When everything's offensive, nothing's funny. When everyone's a victim, no one's responsible. When the truth becomes negotiable, reality disappears. Greg pauses, lets that sink in, then tilts his head slightly, voice lowering. And here's the irony: they used to own the culture. They used to be the cool ones, the artists, the rebels. Now they're the hall monitors of society, handing out citations for wrongthink. They've traded guitars for clipboards. He chuckles quietly. You can't lead a revolution when you're scolding the audience. The camera zooms in, and Greg's eyes lock dead center. Can they change? He asks, letting the question hang. Sure, when Harvard lets in Republicans. The crowd explodes, laughter rising, applause echoing, and Greg just smiles, holding his hands out as if to say, there it is. The truth, wrapped in a joke, his signature move. He sits back down, lets the room calm. Look, he says, almost gently now. I don't hate them. I pity them. Because you can't build a movement on misery. You can't sell progress through guilt. And you can't connect with people when you treat joy like a privilege. He shakes his head, sighing lightly. Kamala's still out there talking about equity and inclusion. But you can't include people in a joke you stopped telling. The crowd goes quiet for half a beat. Then the laughter returns, rolling into applause that fills the studio. Greg grins, taps his stack of notes against the desk, and nods once. That's tonight's reality check, he says, his voice firm but playful again. We laugh because it's true, and we laugh because we're free. And as long as we can still laugh, they haven't won. He raises his coffee mug like a glass, eyes gleaming with mischief. Good night, America. Try not to take the jokes personally. The audience roars, the lights fade, and the camera pulls back on Greg's smile, steady, unbothered, and perfectly timed. Fade out under applause, and the echo of laughter that sounds, for just a moment, like freedom.